Hey, welcome back. We are ready for the next part here. We are now going to see what happens when we divide a fraction by a whole number. Okay, so for this example, Corey has 3/4 of a quart of juice and he wants to pour it equally into 6 glasses. So we're taking 3/4 of a quart and we have to split it into 6 glasses. That means for the expression, our dividend will be 3/4. That's what we're splitting up, 3/4 of a quart of juice, and we will divide that by 6. Okay, to make a model to represent that, we have to start with our dividend, like we said before. So I'm going to make one big rectangle. I'm going to break it into fourths, okay? Remember the denominator always tells us how many parts to break it into. And then I'm going to shade in 3/4 of that. Okay, so that represents the 3/4 of a quart of juice that we're starting with. Now I'm going to grab a different color and I'm going to draw lines going vertically now the other direction, and we're going to split this into 6 parts. Okay, so each of these parts, or each column that I just drew, would represent 1 glass of juice. So if I focus on 1 glass, you can see that we're going to have 3 parts out of, hold on here, I want to write that down so I don't forget, and then I want to count up how many parts I have in this rectangle all together. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going across, and 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So 6 by 4 tells me that there would be 24 total parts to my rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to say that one more time. First, we represented 3/4 of a quart of juice. So I drew my one big rectangle, split it into fourths, and shaded in 3/4. That's the green part. Then we went the other direction to divide it by 6, and I split my rectangle into 6 parts using my blue pen. Each column represents 1 glass of juice. Okay, so if you look at just one column, you can see what's colored. I had 3 parts out of the 24 parts all together in my rectangle. Okay, so we can simplify that fraction by dividing each number by 3. So it would simplify down to 1/8. That means that each glass will have 1/8 of a quart of juice. Okay, so now it's your turn to try it on your own. Oops. Move on down to the bottom part of your page, and you are going to try to do a fraction divided by a whole number. Go ahead and pause the video, work it out, and then you can hit play again to see if you got it correct. Good luck! Hello again! So guys, we are almost done learning about how to divide fractions using models, okay? So bear with me, we have one last thing we want to talk about, and that is what it will look like if we have a fraction that we're dividing by another fraction, okay? So in this case, Kate has got 2/3 of a yard of fabric. She's going to make small flags to put on the table as decoration. Each flag requires 1/6 of a yard of fabric. How many flags can Kate make? Okay, so we are trying to figure out how many 1/6 she can get out of 2/3. Okay, how many 1/6 are in 2/3? Sorry, that's not very neat. You guys can write yours neater. Okay, how many 1/6 are in 2/3? So you want to ask yourself, what is it that we're splitting up? Are we splitting up 2/3 of a yard of fabric, or are we splitting up 1/6 of a yard of fabric? Okay, so picture, if you will, she's got this big long piece of fabric, okay, which is like material. This would be 2/3 of a yard, and then she's going to cut it into these smaller pieces that are each 1/6 of a yard. Okay, so we're starting out with this bigger part, which is our 2/3 of a yard, and we're going to divide that by 1/6. that expression means how many 1/6 can I get out of 2/3. Now, for this particular model, there's a couple ways that you could do it, okay? And I'm going to use a number line, actually a double number line. So you could use a rectangle also, but sometimes it's nice to use number lines, and I think it makes a lot of sense here if you've got material stretched out and you're going to be cutting it into smaller parts. Okay, so for the model, we're going to start with the dividend of 2/3 again. We're going to represent that on the top line. So I'm going to split those into thirds, and you can go ahead and draw your lines all the way down, that's fine. And I like to label my dividend on the top line. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit just so you can see it a little bit better even. So here's our 2/3. So I'm going to assume that 0 is down here and 1 is here at the ends of our lines. So go ahead and you can do that with me also. Okay, so I'm going to switch colors here just to help us visualize this a little bit more. So that means that if we had this fabric in front of us, it would stretch out and be this long, okay, 2/3 of a yard. Now we want to see how many 1/6 we can get out of that. So on the bottom number line, I'm going to break it into 6. And I know that I could cut each third in half to give me 6. And I'm going to label those. This would be 1/6. 2/6 is the same as 1/3. Okay, we know those are equivalent fractions. There's 3/6. 2/3 would be 4/6. And then here we have our 5/6. Okay? Now we're able to count how many 1/6 yard pieces we could get out of 2/3. Okay, and I'm going to circle them. So you see right here would be one piece. That's 1/6 of a yard long. Here's another 1/6 of a yard, another 1/6 of a yard, and another 1/6 of a yard. And I can stop here because that's all the material we had, just 2/3 of a yard. So when you do that, then we can count those circles, and that will tell us how many 1/6 there are in 2/3. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the quotient is 4. She would be able to make 4 flags that each used 1/6 of a yard of fabric. Okay, so we took a fraction and divided it by a fraction and ended up with a whole number, which might seem kind of silly, but that's the way it works out. It follows our rule of whenever we divide by a number that's less than 1, our quotient gets bigger. Okay, remember our parts are smaller, but we have more of them now. So 2/3 divided by 1/6 is equal to 4. You guys are ready to try one more on your own? So if you go down to the bottom part of the page, show me how to divide a fraction by a fraction. Go ahead and hit pause. And once you have it finished, you can hit play again and check to see if your answer is correct.